My wife declared, if I can't come to terms with her ex staying overnight at our place, then it's just my insecurities. In the end, I let him take the guest room, made breakfast, smiled, and played the perfect host. She had no idea that his wife was already on her way, and that was only the beginning. By the time Monica realized that I wasn't passive at all, I was already 10 steps ahead. Some men explode, but I calculated everything. My name is Bradley Harlow. I am 45 years old. For the past 9 years, I have been working as a production manager at the Henderson Auto Parts Factory, a medium-sized facility outside Columbus, Ohio. I keep everything in strict order, manage 200 employees, monitor production targets, and ensure that safety protocols are followed to the last letter. It is hard but honest work. I am proud of what I do. My career has been built on discipline, consistency, and daily effort. I believe that the same principles applied to my marriage. Monica, my wife of 7 years, works as a marketing coordinator at a regional tech firm. She is smart, organized, and always knows how to present things in the most favorable light. That skill of hers, as I later realized, extended far beyond her professional life. We met at a charity gala. She had Evan with her son from her first marriage. The boy was 10 then, quiet but very observant. I liked that about him. Over the years, I tried to become the steady foundation he needed. I taught him how to change tires, throw a ball properly, and stand up for himself without using his fists. He calls me Brad, not Dad, and that's fine. Respect has to be earned, not demanded. It was a Thursday evening when Monica blindsided me with the news. I had just come back from the factory, still wearing my work boots. She appeared in the kitchen doorway with that expression, jaw slightly tighter than usual, as if she were already bracing for an argument. "Nathan is coming this weekend," she said, pouring herself a glass of wine. She didn't offer me one. Nathan Pierce, her ex-boyfriend from college, the man she had mentioned maybe 3 times in 7 years, always in passing, always with that nostalgic tone people use when talking about someone supposedly unimportant. "Okay," I answered slowly, setting my keys on the table. "That's nice. Where is he staying?" She took a sip, looking at me over her glass. "Here, in the guest bedroom." The air in the kitchen thickened. I kept my voice calm. "You're inviting your ex-boyfriend to live in our house?" "He's just a friend, Bradley," Monica cut in, her tone sharp. "If you can't handle that, that's your insecurity, not my problem." There it was, the accusation, seasoned with condescension. The hint that any objection from me would make me seem controlling, jealous, and weak. I had seen that tactic before, not from her, but from people who want to win an argument by making you doubt yourself instead of answering the question. I didn't take the bait. I just nodded. "When is he coming?" She blinked, clearly surprised I wasn't arguing. "Saturday afternoon." "All right," I said, and left the kitchen. I heard her call something after me about maturity, but I was already on the stairs. At that moment, I wasn't angry. I was calculating. Because when someone shows you their true face, you have to believe what you see. And Monica had just told me everything I needed to know. Saturday morning brought the kind of clarity that only comes after a sleepless night. Friday evening I had spent in my home office with the door closed, reviewing old bank statements and phone records. Monica thought I was checking factory reports. Let her think that. The truth was more methodical. 2 months earlier, I had opened a separate account, quietly redirecting my direct deposits. Nothing dramatic, just a precaution I took when she started getting strange late-night messages. Now I was glad I had done it. I transferred another portion of funds from our joint account, enough to cover 6 months of expenses. If she noticed, she didn't say anything. She was too busy preparing the guest room, fluffing pillows as if she were readying a hotel suite. Evan found me in the garage around noon. I was sorting through a toolbox, more to occupy my hands than out of necessity. "Are you okay with this?" he asked, leaning against the workbench. At 17, he was almost my height, a broad-shouldered kid from the school football team. He had his mother's eyes, but thankfully, not her talent for deception. "With what exactly?" I asked, not looking up. "Nathan's staying here," Evan replied. "Mom's acting weird, too cheerful. It's fake." I set down the wrench I was holding. "What do you think about it?" He shrugged, but his jaw tightened. "I think it's disrespectful to you and to this house, but she doesn't care about my opinion. Has she told you much about him?" "Just that he's some hotshot sales manager at BMW. Last week she showed me his social media profile, I said. Evan was quiet for a moment. Brad, if you want, I can make his stay here unbearable. I know how to be a sullen teenager. I nearly smiled. No, let him come. Let him get comfortable. Evan studied me for a moment. You have a plan. I have information. Plans come later, I corrected. He nodded slowly and stepped back from the workbench. Just know, you've been more of a father to me than my biological dad ever was. Whatever happens, I'm on your side. He left before I could answer, but those words hit me harder than I expected. Now it wasn't just about Monica. It was about a kid who called me Brad, but looked at me with admiration. I wasn't about to let him watch his mother tear apart his home without consequences. That same day, I called Jim Driscoll, an old friend from my Army Reserve days who now ran a private investigation agency. I didn't go into details. I just said I needed someone followed. He didn't ask questions. He just named his price and promised someone would be on site by Monday. When Nathan's silver BMW pulled into our driveway at 4:30 p.m., I was ready, or as ready as a man can be, preparing to meet his wife's lover in his own home with a smile and a handshake. Monica ran out to greet him before he even turned off the engine. I watched from the living room window as she hugged him and laughed in a way she hadn't laughed with me in months. He was tall, well-dressed, and possessed that kind of confidence that comes to men who have never worked with their hands. He grabbed a duffel bag from the trunk and followed her inside. We met in the foyer. Nathan extended his hand. "You must be Bradley," he said, flashing white teeth. "Thanks for putting me up, pal. Appreciated." I shook his hand. Firm grip, eye contact, a perfect imitation of sincerity. "No problem," I replied evenly. "Welcome to our home." Monica was beaming. Nathan smiled, and I began counting down the hours until Sunday morning. Dinner turned into a performance where Monica played the lead role. She had made roasted chicken, her signature dish, which she only served on occasions she deemed important. Nathan sat across from me at the dining table. He acted relaxed, as if this weren't his first visit to someone else's territory. "So, Bradley," Nathan began, cutting into his meat, "Monica says you run a factory. Must be a lot of work." "It keeps me sharp," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "What about you? Sales, right?" "Regional manager at Apex Medical Solutions," he said, leaning back slightly. "We supply surgical equipment to hospitals across the Midwest. Lots of travel, but the commissions are worth it." Monica laughed, touching his arm. "Nathan just closed a deal with the Cleveland Clinic. Orders worth $500,000. "Impressive," I said, though I wasn't impressed. I was watching her hand linger on his forearm, watching him lean toward her as they spoke, as if I weren't there. Evan sat next to me, silently poking at his food. He had barely said 2 words since Nathan arrived. "Evan, right?" Nathan finally addressed him. "Your mom says you're into football. What position do you play?" "Linebacker," Evan grunted, not looking up. "Good position. Takes guts to be on the front line," Nathan said, as if he knew anything about football. "Planning to play in college?" "Maybe," Evan replied shortly. Monica shot him a look. "Ohio State University is recruiting Evan. We're very proud." "That's great," Nathan said, but he was already turning back to Monica. "Remember when we went to that game in Ann Arbor, junior year?" And off they went into memories I had no part of, laughing at jokes I didn't understand. I ate in silence, mentally noting every touch, every glance, every inside reference. This wasn't just a visit from an old friend. This was 2 people reliving something they had never truly let go of. After dinner, Monica suggested drinks on the patio. I declined, citing paperwork. Nathan raised his glass in a mock toast. "Don't overwork yourself, old man." I went upstairs, but not to the study. I entered our bedroom and opened Monica's laptop, which she had left charging on the nightstand. She had never changed her password. It was still Evan's birthday. Her email was open. I scrolled through the recent messages. Most were work-related, but then I found what I was looking for. An exchange with Nathan, beginning 3 months earlier. "I can't wait to see you. It's been too long. I've missed you too, more than I should. Does he suspect anything?" "No, he never notices anything. He's always been like that." I read the messages over 2 months. Plans, arrangements, the veiled language that wasn't really secret. They had met twice before, once in Cincinnati, once in Louisville. Both times, she had told me she was going to marketing conferences. I photographed every message with my phone. Then I closed the laptop, put it back, and went downstairs. They were still on the patio, glasses half empty, voices low and intimate. I stood in the doorway, watching them through the glass. Monica tilted her head back, laughing. Nathan's hand rested on the arm of her chair, just a few centimeters from her fingers. I turned around and went back upstairs. In the guest room, I placed a small voice-activated recorder into the ventilation grate. Jim had given it to me that morning while Monica was at work. That device would record everything said in that room over the next 72 hours. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was acting methodically, because anger clouds the mind, and I needed clarity. By the time I got into bed, Monica still hadn't come up. I lay in the dark, listening to the distant echoes of laughter from downstairs, and began planning the next day. I woke up at 5:30 a.m., as always. Monica's side of the bed was cold. She had slept in the guest room, or, more precisely, she had been there. That distinction mattered. I showered, dressed, and went downstairs. The house was silent. I brewed strong black coffee and sat down at the kitchen table with my phone. The recorder transmitted files to an app. I opened the recording from last night and began to listen. 2:15 a.m. Monica's voice, slightly slurred from wine. I can't believe he didn't even ask any questions. Nathan's voice. I told you he's passive, too nice for his own good. Monica laughed softly. I used to think that was attractive. Now it just seems boring. Nathan replied, You deserve better. You always have. Then a pause, and sounds I didn't need to hear to understand everything. I stopped the recording. I sat for a long time, staring into my coffee cup. The betrayal should have hurt more. Maybe it would later. Right now, I felt only cold, clear resolve in my chest. At 6:30 a.m., I heard movement upstairs. Not from the master bedroom, from the guest room. At 7 a.m., I started making breakfast. Eggs, bacon, toast. The smell filled the house. Monica appeared first in her robe, hair disheveled, avoiding my eyes. Good morning, she said cautiously. Good morning, I replied, flipping the bacon. Coffee's ready. She poured herself a cup and sat down silently at the table. A few minutes later, Nathan came down, wearing the same clothes as yesterday, looking far too much at home. Smells great, he said, sitting across from Monica. I placed plates in front of them. Help yourselves. We ate in silence. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, but I kept my face perfectly calm. Monica kept glancing at me, trying to gauge my mood. Nathan ate with the serene expression of a man without a care in the world. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Monica looked up, clearly confused. She asked who might be coming at such an early hour. I set down my fork and headed to the door. On the doorstep stood Rachel Pierce. Her blonde hair was tied in a neat ponytail. She wore tailored pants and a blazer. In her hand, she held Nathan's duffel bag. In a cold but calm voice, she greeted me and said she was looking for her husband. I stepped aside, invited her in, and said he was in the kitchen. Rachel walked past me, her heels clicking distinctly on the parquet floor. I followed her. When she appeared in the kitchen doorway, Nathan's fork clattered onto his plate. He went pale, jumped up, and stammered in surprise. He asked what she was doing there. Rachel replied evenly that she was bringing his things, the things he had left at that woman's house. Monica's gaze shifted from the guest to Nathan, and realization slowly dawned on her face. She asked if this woman was his wife. Rachel turned to her, and for the first time, emotion crept into her voice. She confirmed that she had been his wife for 12 years and the mother of his 2 children. Then she looked back at Nathan and asked if he had forgotten to mention that detail. Nathan opened his mouth, but no words came out. Rachel's gaze stopped on me. She asked if I had known. I replied quietly that I had suspicions, which were confirmed on Friday. She gave a short nod, acknowledging our shared position as the deceived parties. Then she turned back to Monica, who sat motionless, her face pale. Rachel told her that her husband had promised to stay with a college friend named Mike. She added ironically how surprised she was when Nathan's assistant mentioned his trip to Columbus to see friends, plural. Rachel smiled bitterly, adding that she worked as an elementary school principal and was used to spotting liars even in a crowded cafeteria. Nathan finally found his voice and tried to start explaining, but his wife cut him off sharply. She turned to me and thanked me for the coffee invitation. Though I hadn't invited her, I understood the gesture and replied that she would be welcome any time. Rachel handed the bag to her husband and declared that he could sleep anywhere but their shared home tonight. As she left, she wished Monica luck, adding that she would need it. When the door closed behind her, a deafening silence fell. Monica stared at Nathan with an expression of shock and betrayal. She repeated that he was married. He ran a hand through his hair and muttered that it was complicated. I said quietly but firmly that they both needed to get out of my house immediately. Nathan grabbed his bag and rushed outside, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Monica remained at the table, staring at the uneaten breakfast. In a hollow voice, she accused me of setting this up. I replied that I had only made one phone call, because Rachel deserved to know the truth about her husband's actions. Monica cried out that I had no right. I interrupted her, reminding her that this was my house, into which she had brought her lover while lying to me for months. I placed my phone on the table between us and asked if she wanted to hear the recording of their conversation from last night, where she called me boring and passive. She went pale and asked if I had recorded them. I calmly explained that there was a voice-activated device in the guest room ventilation. In Ohio, that is legal if the recording is made on my own property. I scrolled through my phone and added that I also had their correspondence over 3 months, including plans for trips to Cincinnati and Louisville, which she had passed off as marketing conferences. Monica's hands began to shake. She tried to make excuses, but I stopped her. I told her I had already filed for divorce and that the papers would be served to her on Tuesday. She abruptly stood up, her chair scraping loudly. She declared that I couldn't just erase 7 years of marriage. I countered that she had done that, not me. Picking up my coffee cup, I added that she had until Friday to pack her things and move out, after which I would change all the locks. Monica raised her voice, saying this was her home too. I corrected her, reminding her that the property was in my name and had been purchased 2 years before our marriage. I emphasized that she would receive only what the court decided, and given the evidence, that would be a pittance. She looked at me as if I were a stranger. The once accommodating husband had apparently vanished, and in his place stood the man who had spent 3 days meticulously preparing for this moment. Trying to find leverage, she asked about Evan. I replied that he was nearly 18 and old enough to choose where to live. I added that after our conversation yesterday, she was in for an unpleasant surprise. Tears welled up in Monica's eyes, but I felt no pity, only cold clarity. She whispered that she had given me everything. I corrected her. I had given her everything, and in return, I received only lies. Walking past her toward the stairs, I reminded her that she had 4 days left to pack. Upstairs in my study, I closed the door. From the window, I watched her stand in the kitchen for a long time before finally breaking down in tears. Part of me expected guilt or sadness over the lost past, but I felt only relief. My phone buzzed with a message from Evan. He wrote that he had heard everything from upstairs and had firmly decided to stay with me because his mother had made her own choice. I replied with words of thanks, emphasizing that it was his decision. A message followed from Jim Driscoll, suggesting we meet today at 2 p.m., as he had new, important information. I sensed this would make the divorce proceedings even more serious. Jim's office was in a converted warehouse with brick walls and industrial lighting. He met me with a folder in his hand and a grim expression. He warned that I wouldn't like the news. Inside the folder were photographs, bank statements, and printed messages. Jim explained that after Friday, he had investigated Nathan Pierce and discovered interesting facts. He showed me a photo of Nathan and Monica at a Louisville restaurant 6 weeks earlier, but the main document was a bank statement. 4 months ago, a joint account had been opened in the names of Nathan Pierce and Monica Harlow. My insides tightened. When I asked about the amount, Jim replied that there was $87,000 in it. Most of that money had been transferred from my personal savings account in small increments of $3,000 and $5,000 over 3 months, small enough that I wouldn't notice the loss. I stared at those numbers and thought about years of hard work, 60 hours a week. That money was meant for my retirement and Evan's education, and instead, it had been stolen and funneled into her lover's account. Jim pulled out another document, a lease agreement for an apartment in downtown Cincinnati, signed by both of them. The lease began the following month. They had been planning to leave together. Nathan's visit to our house was not a coincidence or a bout of nostalgia. It was a rehearsal for their new life, financed with my money. I asked if Nathan's wife knew about the account and the apartment. Jim said no, but added that he was ready to send copies of the documents to her lawyer immediately. I remembered Rachel's dignified behavior that morning and decided she deserved to know everything. I gave the order to send the papers. I looked again at the photographs, Monica smiling happily at Nathan by candlelight, while I worked 12-hour shifts at the factory. Jim quietly added that the signature on the documents authorizing the transfer of funds from my account had been forged. It looked similar to mine, but the pressure and letter formation revealed the forgery. She had likely practiced for a long time, copying the signature from tax returns. Jim confirmed that this constituted bank fraud and a serious criminal offense. He asked if I wanted to press charges. I thought about it. That would mean police and possible prison time for Monica. Evan would have to watch his mother get arrested, but it would also mean real accountability for what she had done. I asked for time to think and took the flash drive with all the materials, enough to completely destroy her in court. Jim noted that I was handling the situation better than most men. I wasn't sure about that. I just knew I had no right to give up while Evan depended on me. On the way home, I made a decision. Monica could remain free, but she would pay back every stolen dollar. On Monday morning, Evan was already sitting at the kitchen table, with papers spread out. His face was serious beyond his years. He had prepared emancipation forms and a letter to the court regarding custody. I tried to tell him he didn't have to do this, but he cut me off. It turned out that yesterday, while I was at Jim's office, his mother's lawyer had called him. Evan had been told he would have to testify about where he wanted to live, and he had decided to get ahead of it. I read his letter. In it, a 17-year-old young man formally asked the court to place him with Bradley Harlow. He wrote that although I was not his biological father, I had become his one true parent, the one who had taught him responsibility and respect. He emphasized that his mother's actions contradicted those values, and he was choosing the person who lived by them. I set down the letter, feeling a lump in my throat. Evan confirmed that he was absolutely sure of his decision. Soon the doorbell rang. A courier handed me an envelope containing the divorce petition filed by Monica's lawyer, filed just last Friday. She was demanding half the value of the house, alimony, and compensation for emotional distress. Evan, reading over my shoulder, was surprised by her audacity. I explained that it was just a legal strategy, demand the maximum in hopes of concessions. Later, my lawyer called and said that Monica's side was offering a deal. She would drop her claims to the house if I paid her $15,000 in cash and withdrew Evan's affidavit. I flatly refused. The lawyer added that they were now trying to shift all the blame onto Nathan, claiming that Monica hadn't known the money in their joint account was stolen from my savings. That is a blatant lie. I am fully aware of this, which is why I have already filed a motion to produce all of her bank statements. We will be able to prove that every single transfer of funds was personally authorized by her. Bradley, they are genuinely scared. That counteroffer was just a gesture of sheer desperation. What do you advise? Hold firm. We need to force them to reveal all their cards during the discovery process. Once they realize we have proof of forged signatures and documented facts of fraud, they will fold immediately. I hung up and looked at Evan, who was focused on his homework at the table. In just 4 months, he would legally become an adult, but right now, he was still a teenager forced to watch his family fall apart, and he had chosen to stand with me. "Hey, Evan," I called. He looked up. "Yeah? Thank you for that letter." He gave a short nod. "You deserved it." That same evening, I received a message from Rachel Pierce. Nathan had finally moved out. She had decided to take the children to her parents' house for a while. Rachel thanked me for uncovering the truth. I replied that she had every right to know, and I wished her well. The reply came within a minute. "You take care of yourself too. And for the record, your wife made the biggest mistake of her life." I didn't write back. I just sat in the silence of the now empty house, while Evan studied in his room upstairs, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. That particular serenity that comes when you know you have done the right thing, even if it cost you dearly. 3 weeks into the divorce proceedings, I received a call from a law firm with an unfamiliar name. The area code was Philadelphia. "Mr. Harlow, my name is Gerald Fitzpatrick. I represent the heirs of Thomas Mitchell." Thomas Mitchell was Evan's maternal grandfather, Monica's father. He had passed away 8 months earlier, long before any of this began. "I know who Mr. Mitchell is," I said cautiously. "What is this about?" The lawyer explained he was calling about his will, specifically about a clause concerning his grandson. Evan, were you aware that Mr. Mitchell left him a rather substantial inheritance? I sat upright in my chair. No, Monica had never mentioned a word about this. That is quite troubling, Fitzpatrick noted. According to the deceased's wishes, Evan was to receive $450,000 on his 18th birthday. Until that time, the funds were to be held in a trust, with Monica Mitchell Harlow as trustee. However, serious discrepancies had recently been discovered in the trust account. My stomach tightened. What kind of discrepancies exactly? It turned out that the account had been opened in March as planned, but by July, $300,000 had been withdrawn. All transactions had been personally authorized by the trustee. The lawyer asked whether my wife had made any very large purchases or investments recently. The $87,000 in the joint account with Nathan was only a small part of what I had found. The rest of the money had gone elsewhere. I said I needed to speak with my own lawyer, and Evan needed to know what had happened. Fitzpatrick agreed and added that he was ready to file a complaint for breach of fiduciary duty, but given Evan's age, he would need my assistance as stepfather. After the call ended, I sat staring at my phone. Monica hadn't only stolen from me, she had stolen from her own son. $300,000, money his grandfather had left for college and his future, simply gone. I called Evan from his room. "Sit down," I said. "We need to have a serious conversation." I told him everything, holding nothing back. His face cycled through bewilderment, shock, and then raw fury. "She stole from me?" he asked, his voice trembling. "My grandfather's money?" "That's what it looks like," I confirmed. The probate lawyer was investigating, but the evidence was clear. $300,000 had been withdrawn over 4 months. "That's why she could afford all those trips with Nathan," Evan said slowly. "That's why she wasn't worried about money. She was spending my inheritance." "I'm sorry," I said. Evan stood up abruptly and began pacing the room. "No, don't apologize. You didn't do this." He turned to me. "What can we do?" I explained that the lawyer intended to file criminal charges, theft, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. This was very serious. His mother could go to prison. "Good," he said without hesitation. "That's what she deserves. Stealing from your own child to fund an affair with a married man. That's not just bad, Brad. That's evil." I looked at him closely, seeing the deep pain beneath the anger. I asked if he was sure, because once we started this process, there would be no going back. Evan cut me off. "I'm absolutely sure. She made her choice. Now she has to live with it." I called Gerald Fitzpatrick back and said we would file the complaint and cooperate fully. "Mr. Harlow, I want you to know one more thing," he added. "Thomas specifically mentioned you in a letter attached to his will. He wrote that you were exactly the man he had hoped his daughter would marry, that you treated his grandson with great respect and dignity. He wanted you to know that." I closed my eyes and thanked him for those words. That same night, Monica's lawyer panicked and contacted my attorney. Somehow, news of the trust fund investigation had reached them. They offered total surrender, a no-contest divorce, and immediate return of all remaining funds. It was too late. The complaint had already been filed, and Evan had already given his statement to the police. The court hearing lasted 3 hours. Monica's lawyer tried every possible tactic. There were claims of emotional distress, assertions that I had been controlling, and desperate attempts to paint her as a victim. None of it worked. The judge methodically reviewed all the evidence: the forged bank signatures, the joint account with Nathan, the stolen inheritance from Evan's trust. When he looked up from the documents, his expression was severe. "Mrs. Harlow," he said, "I have sat on this bench for 19 years. I have seen many difficult divorces, but I have rarely encountered such a deliberate and calculated scheme of deceit and theft." He set the papers aside. The court ruled in Mr. Harlow's favor on all counts: full restitution of marital assets, immediate compensation to Evan Mitchell's trust fund, no spousal support for the former wife, and no rights to our shared home. Monica sat motionless as her lawyer held her hand. Furthermore, the judge continued, given Evan's age and clearly expressed preference, custody was awarded to me. Visitation for Mrs. Harlow would be solely at Evan's discretion. He looked directly at Monica. "You have betrayed not only your husband but your own son. That has consequences." The gavel fell. Monica didn't even glance in my direction as she left the courtroom. Her mother supported her on one side, her lawyer on the other. Evan was waiting outside. "How did it go?" We won, I said. Everything. He hugged me tight, fiercely. Good. Can we get burgers? I'm starving. We ate at his favorite diner, talking about college applications and football scholarships, deliberately avoiding the unpleasant topics. But as we were about to leave, Evan stopped me. Brad, I need to tell you something. He took a deep breath. Thank you for not turning your back on me, for showing me what it really means to be a man. My grandfather was right about you. I asked about the letter the lawyer had mentioned. Evan confirmed he had read it. Grandpa Tom had written that I was exactly the kind of man his daughter should have valued, that I treated his grandson as if he truly mattered. Evan's voice faltered slightly. He was right. I pulled him close and hugged him. You have always mattered to me, Evan. Always. 2 weeks later, Monica was formally charged with theft, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. Her lawyer managed to negotiate a plea deal. The outcome? 3 years of probation, full restitution, and mandatory community service. Prison was avoided, but her reputation was destroyed. Around the same time, Nathan and Rachel's divorce was finalized. I heard from Jim that Nathan had moved to Arizona, trying to escape the fallout. Rachel stayed in Columbus, focusing entirely on raising her children and her career. As for me, I threw myself into work and helping Evan prepare for college. Ohio State University offered him a partial scholarship. With the recovered trust funds, he could afford the rest. Life moved forward, quieter but cleaner, like a wound that was finally healing. 8 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Rachel Pierce at a cafe. It wasn't planned, just a coincidence. We ended up at the same place downtown. Recognizing each other, she gestured for me to join her at her table. Small world, she remarked. Our town is even smaller, I replied, sitting down. We talked easily and naturally, two people who had survived the same storm. She told me about her children adjusting to a new life and her current routine. I shared news of Evan's college enrollment and our factory's expansion. You seem to be doing well, Rachel said. You look calm. I'm striving for that, I admitted. Some days are harder than others. I know what you mean. She stirred her coffee. My therapist says it takes about a year to truly process something like this, to stop constantly looking over your shoulder, waiting for the next blow. Does that sound right? I agreed with her. Before we left, we exchanged phone numbers, promising to keep in touch. There was no romantic undertone, just mutual respect between two people who had endured. At the end of August, Evan moved into the dormitory. I helped him unpack, met his roommate, and delivered the standard fatherly speech about studying hard and making good choices. When I was about to leave, he walked me to the car. You'll be okay? He asked. The house will be really empty now. I'll manage, I assured him. Besides, you're only 2 hours away. I'll come visit, he promised. Often. You're not getting rid of me that easily, Brad. I wouldn't have it any other way. I drove home through the afternoon traffic. The truck bed was empty now, and the house awaited my return. For the first time in months, that didn't frighten me. Emptiness didn't mean loneliness. It was simply open space, ready to be filled with whatever the future might bring. A year later, I ran into Rachel again, this time at a charity gala. We spent most of the evening talking, and when she suggested dinner the following week, I said yes. It wasn't a sudden spark. There was no rush, no desperation. Just two people who had known loss and rebuilt themselves from the ruins, cautiously exploring what might grow on the ground they had cleared. Evan, of course, approved. She's a good person, Brad, and you deserve someone who understands that. As for Monica, through mutual acquaintances, I heard she had moved to Cincinnati, worked in a store, and lived in a small apartment. The glamorous life she had chased with Nathan had vanished, leaving her only with the consequences of her actions. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt nothing toward her at all. She had become a chapter I had closed for good. It was a lesson in believing actions over words. What I had gained was worth far more than what I had lost. Evan's respect, my own dignity, and the knowledge that I had walked through the worst moment of my life with honor and strength intact. That was enough. More than enough. That was everything.